A teacher gives $25 to a homeless girl to eat. 25 years later, a billionaire shows up at his school. The sun had barely risen on the horizon when Andrew Smith, a 40-year-old math teacher, hurried out of his small apartment. His hands trembled slightly as he locked the door, not due to the usual rush of another Monday, but because of the weight of the decision he had made the night before. "Last month," he murmured to himself, his tired eyes fixed on the brown envelope in his hands. Inside were all his savings from the past 6 months, exactly $150. Enough for the down payment on a commercial space downtown, the first step to opening the tutoring center he had dreamed of for years. The bus was more crowded than usual. Andrew squeezed in among the passengers, holding the envelope tightly to his chest as if his life depended on it. In a way, it did. At 40, he felt it was his last chance to escape the stagnation that had been suffocating his dreams for so long. He got off in the city center, his heart racing not just from the brisk walk to the bank. With every step, he felt the weight of years of accumulated frustrations, of seeing brilliant students give up due to lack of opportunities, of fighting against an educational system that seemed designed to fail. That was when he saw her, or rather, almost tripped over her. A girl, no more than 12 years old, huddled in the entrance of a closed shop. Her deep, hollow eyes fixed on Andrew for a moment before returning to the ground, but it was enough. In that brief instant, Andrew saw something that hit him like a punch in the stomach. It was the same look he saw in the mirror every morning, a look of someone on the verge of giving up. Andrew stopped. Time seemed to freeze around him, the noise of the street dissipating into a distant hum. His hand tightened on the envelope, his knuckles turning white with the force. "Excuse me!" An irritated voice brought him back to reality. A woman in a suit passed by him, casting a look of disdain at the girl on the sidewalk. It was as if a movie played before Andrew's eyes. He saw himself at 12, wearing worn-out shoes to school, his stomach growling during classes. He saw Mr. Rogers, who one day called him after class and, without saying a word, placed a sandwich and a chocolate bar in his hand. That simple gesture changed his life. It was what inspired him to become a teacher. Before he could think twice, Andrew crouched down beside the girl. "Hey, what's your name?" The girl stared at him, suspicious. "Lucy," she murmured after a moment. Andrew hesitated for a second, then opened the envelope. His fingers trembled as he counted out 5 $5 bills. "Lucy, take this," he said, extending the money. "Go get something to eat and, if you can, buy a notebook and a pen." The girl's eyes widened, alternating between the money and Andrew's face, as if expecting it to be a cruel joke. "Go," Andrew insisted gently. "And promise you'll try to go back to school, okay?" Lucy nodded slowly, carefully taking the money as if it were made of glass. Then, in a sudden movement, she stood up and ran off, disappearing into the crowd before Andrew could say anything else. Standing up again, Andrew looked at the envelope in his hands, $140. It was no longer enough for the down payment. His dream would have to wait a few more months. Taking a deep breath, he put the envelope in the inner pocket of his worn-out coat and started walking towards the school where he taught. The sense of defeat he expected to feel did not come. Instead, a strange peace enveloped him. "Who knows," Andrew thought, a small smile forming on his lips. "Maybe I just changed a life." Little did he know that on that seemingly ordinary Monday morning, not one but 2 lives had been changed forever, and that those $25 would be the beginning of a journey that 25 years later would bring consequences neither of them could have imagined. Lucy clutched the 5 $5 bills to her chest as she ran through the downtown streets, her bare feet skillfully dodging shards of glass and sharp stones. Her heart pounded, not just from the run, but from the overwhelming emotion, a mix of fear, hope, and distrust. Only when she turned into a narrow, familiar alley, away from the main avenue's prying eyes, did she slow down. She leaned against a worn brick wall, breathing heavily, and opened her hand to look at the money again. It was real. It wasn't a dream. 25, she murmured to herself, still in disbelief. It was more money than she had ever held in her life. Her stomach growled loudly, reminding her she hadn't eaten in almost 2 days. For a moment, Lucy imagined herself walking into a bakery, buying all the bread and sweets she could carry. The idea was tempting, almost irresistible. But then, the words of the strange man echoed in her mind. Buy a notebook and a pen. Lucy bit her lip, indecisive. Food was urgent, yes, but something about those words intrigued her. School. How long had it been since she had set foot in one? 2 years? 3? The days on the streets blended together, making it hard to keep track. With a determined sigh, Lucy put the money in the torn pocket of her shorts and started walking. First, food. Then she would see. At the first fruit stand she found, she spent $5 on ripe bananas and an apple. Sitting on the sidewalk, she devoured 2 bananas in seconds, feeling the energy return to her body. The apple she saved for later. With $20 still in her pocket, Lucy found herself in front of a stationery store. Through the window, she saw colorful notebooks, pencils of all colors, shiny backpacks, a world that seemed so distant from her reality. "Can I help you?" The voice of the saleswoman startled her. Lucy hadn't realized she had entered the store. I want a notebook," she said, her voice almost a whisper, "and a pen." The saleswoman looked her up and down, her nose wrinkling in disapproval. Lucy knew that look well. It was the same one she received every day on the streets. "We have notebooks starting at $10, the saleswoman said, her tone making it clear she doubted Lucy could pay. Lucy's heart sank. $10 for a notebook. That left just $10 for the pen. Had she been foolish not to spend it all on food? Then her eyes landed on a box in the corner of the store. "Sally," the sign said. "Slightly damaged notebooks, $5 each. I want one of those," Lucy pointed, her voice firmer now. The saleswoman picked a notebook from the box. The cover was slightly dented, but the pages inside were perfect. White, smooth, full of possibilities. "Do you have a $5 pen?" Lucy asked, hopeful. The saleswoman sighed, picking a simple blue pen from the counter. "This one costs $4. Lucy paid, her hands trembling slightly as she handed over the money. She left the store hugging the notebook and pen as if they were precious treasures. In a way, they were. She found a bench in a nearby park and sat down. The afternoon sun warmed her face as she opened the notebook to the first page. For a moment, she hesitated. What should she write? Slowly, with shaky, uneven letters, Lucy wrote, "Today, a strange man gave me $25. He told me to go back to school. I don't know if I can, but I want to try. I want to be someone." She reread the words several times. Something inside her, a feeling she couldn't name, began to grow. Could it be hope? Lucy looked up at the sky, thinking about the man who had given her the money. Who was he? Why did he care? Would she ever see him again to thank him? Carefully, she closed the notebook and tucked it inside her shirt, close to her chest. The apple in her pocket would be her dinner. Tomorrow, she decided, she would go to the neighborhood school. Just to look, just to see if it was possible. As the sun set, painting the sky orange and pink, Lucy allowed herself, for the first time in a long time, to dream of a different future. A future where she was not just a homeless girl, but someone with a purpose. Little did she know that that simple notebook would be the first step in a journey that would take her farther than she ever imagined. The shrill sound of the school bell echoed through the halls of Jefferson High School, marking the start of another school day. Andrew Smith adjusted his worn-out tie, a nervous habit he had acquired over the years, and entered the 9th grade classroom. "Good morning, class," he said, his voice competing with the chatter of teenagers. Few responded. Most continued their side conversations, some with their eyes glued to cell phones hidden under their desks. Andrew took a deep breath, feeling the familiar weight of frustration settle on his shoulders. "Today we're going to talk about quadratic equations," he announced, turning to write on the blackboard. "What's the point of this in real life, Mr. Smith?" The bored voice of Carlos, a student in the back of the room, stood out. Andrew turned, ready to give the rehearsed answer about the importance of math in everyday life. But he stopped. Carlos's face, with deep circles under his eyes and a vacant look, painfully reminded him of the girl he had met on the street days ago. "You're right to question, Carlos," Andrew said, surprising himself and the class. "The truth is, many of you may never directly use a quadratic equation in your life. But what we're really learning here is how to solve problems, how to think logically." An unusual silence settled in the room. Andrew continued, "Each of you will face unique challenges in life. Math, more than numbers, teaches you to face those challenges head-on, to break them down into smaller parts, to find solutions." For a brief moment, Andrew saw a spark of interest in his students' eyes. But soon, the moment passed, and the familiar apathy returned. He sighed internally and turned back to the board, determined to do his best with what little he had. Meanwhile, across town, Lucy was facing her own educational challenge. With the new notebook clutched to her chest, she stood in front of the gates of Lincoln Elementary School. Her heart raced, a mix of fear and hope coursing through her veins. "Can I help you?" The voice of the school secretary pulled her out of her thoughts. Lucy swallowed hard. I want to study," she said, her voice almost a whisper. The secretary looked her up and down, her eyes lingering on Lucy's dirty clothes and bare feet. "Do you have documents? Proof of residence? A legal guardian?" Each question was like a stab to Lucy's heart. She shook her head negatively, feeling tears forming in the corners of her eyes. "I'm sorry, but without documentation we can't enroll you," the secretary said, her tone a mix of pity and impatience. Lucy nodded mechanically and walked away, the words "we can't" echoing in her mind. She sat on the sidewalk in front of the school, watching the children enter. Their colorful backpacks and carefree laughter, a painful reminder of what she didn't have. But something inside her refused to give up. Opening her notebook, Lucy began to copy the letters and numbers she saw on the posters plastered on the school walls. She didn't understand much of what she was writing, but each word copied was a small victory, an act of rebellion against the fate that seemed predetermined for her. Back at Jefferson High, Andrew was preparing to leave after a long day of classes. As he passed by the teacher's lounge, he overheard a conversation that made him stop. "Did you hear? More budget cuts," said a colleague, shaking his head. "At this rate, we won't even have chalk to write with." "Who needs chalk?" replied another, with a bitter laugh. "Half the students don't even show up anymore. Those who do don't care." Andrew felt a wave of discouragement wash over him. It was true. Each year, conditions seemed to worsen, students dropping out, resources dwindling, the feeling of fighting a losing battle. Leaving the school, Andrew walked slowly through the downtown streets, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. He passed by the spot where he had met the girl days ago, wondering if she had bought a notebook, if she'd gone back to school. That was when he saw, sitting on the sidewalk of a nearby school, a girl. She was furiously writing in a notebook, her face a mask of concentration. Something about the scene touched him deeply. Andrew approached cautiously. "Hi," he said softly. "What are you writing?" The girl looked up, startled. For a moment, Andrew thought she would run away, but then she showed him the notebook, filled with words copied from school posters. I'm trying to learn," she said, her voice a mix of pride and shame. In that instant, something changed inside Andrew. The flame of his vocation, which had been dangerously close to extinguishing, gained new strength. "What's your name?" he asked, sitting down next to her. "Lucy," she replied. "Well, Lucy," Andrew smiled, taking a pencil from his pocket. "How about we start with the alphabet?" As the sun set over the city, a teacher and a homeless girl sitting on a sidewalk represented, unknowingly, a small revolution. A revolution of hope, perseverance, education against all odds. And so, with shaky letters written in a dented notebook, the next chapter of their intertwined journeys began. The years passed like pages of a book being turned by the wind. For Andrew and Lucy, each day brought new challenges, small victories, and sometimes painful defeats. Andrew, now 45, looked at his classroom with a mix of pride and exhaustion. 5 years had passed since that fortuitous encounter with the girl on the street. 5 years of constant struggle against a system that seemed determined to fail. "Mr. Smith," called Maria, a brilliant senior student, "I got the scholarship for college." Andrew's face lit up with a genuine smile. Congratulations, Maria. You deserve it. As the class celebrated their classmate's achievement, Andrew felt a familiar pang of sadness. For every student who managed to beat the odds, how many others were left behind? His thoughts were interrupted by the shrill sound of his cell phone. It was the principal, summoning him to an urgent meeting. In the principal's office, the heavy air foreshadowed bad news. Andrew, I'm sorry, the principal began, avoiding his gaze. The budget cuts. We have to reduce the teaching staff. The words hit Andrew like a punch in the stomach. After 20 years dedicated to that school, he was being let go, not for incompetence, but for a cold financial equation. He left the school that afternoon feeling older than ever. The weight of 2 decades of dreams and struggles seemed to crush his shoulders. He passed by the sidewalk where, years ago, he had taught the first letters to a homeless girl. He wondered what had happened to her. Had his small act of kindness made any difference? Across town, Lucy, now 17, was facing her own challenges. You have potential, girl, said Mrs. Thompson, the elderly lady who had taken her in 3 years ago. But you need to work harder if you want to pass the college entrance exam. Lucy nodded, her eyes fixed on the math book in front of her. The equations danced before her eyes, reminding her of the first lessons she had received from that kind teacher on the sidewalk. After that day, Lucy had clung to education like a shipwrecked person to a piece of wood. With the help of Mrs. Thompson, a retired teacher who had found her sleeping on a park bench, she managed to regularize her documents and return to school. It wasn't easy. Years of life on the streets had left huge gaps in her education, sleepless nights studying, tears of frustration, the constant temptation to give up. But at every obstacle, Lucy remembered the man who had given her $25 and a chance. One day I'll find him, she murmured to herself during the tough moments. So one day I'll thank him and show him it was worth it. While Lucy struggled with derivatives and integrals, Andrew faced the harsh reality of unemployment at 45. I'm sorry, Mr. Smith, said the recruiter, barely hiding her discomfort. We're looking for more updated profiles. Andrew left another failed interview, the weight of rejection mixing with the suffocating heat of the afternoon. His steps took him, almost unconsciously, to the park where he used to give private lessons to the neediest students. He sat on a bench, watching the children play, free from the worries that now consumed him. Then he noticed a group of teenagers gathered under a nearby tree. They were animatedly discussing books and notebooks scattered on the grass. Curious, Andrew approached. Excuse me, he said hesitantly. Are you studying? A girl with colorful braids answered, smiling. Yes, sir, we're preparing for the college entrance exam. Lucas here, she pointed to a boy with glasses, is great at math and is helping us. Andrew felt something stir inside him, an idea, small at first, but quickly gaining strength. Would you like some more help? He offered, his voice betraying a mix of hope and nervousness. The teenagers exchanged glances, then nodded enthusiastically. That afternoon, under the setting sun, Andrew rediscovered his passion for teaching. Without the pressure of standardized tests, without the stifling bureaucracy, he found himself once again connecting with students eager for knowledge. As the sky darkened, Andrew made a promise to himself. He might have lost his formal job, but he would not lose his vocation. There, in that park, something new would be born. Meanwhile, miles away, Lucy closed her study book, a determined smile on her face. Tomorrow would be the big day, the college entrance exam. Thank you, she whispered to the emptiness of her room, thinking of the anonymous teacher who had changed her life years ago. Two paths, seemingly divergent, continued their journey. Little did Andrew and Lucy know that fate, in its infinite wisdom, was already weaving the threads that would one day reconnect them in a way neither could have imagined. The sun had barely risen when Lucy opened her eyes, her heart pounding with a mix of anxiety and determination. Today was the day of the college entrance exam, the day that could change everything. She got up silently, careful not to wake Mrs. Thompson, who slept in the next room. The elderly lady had been more than a benefactor. She had been a true guardian, offering not just a roof but the support and guidance Lucy had never had. Standing in front of the small cracked mirror in the bathroom, Lucy barely recognized the 18-year-old young woman staring back at her. Where once there had been a scared and hungry girl, now stood a determined woman with eyes shining with hope and hard-earned knowledge. "You can do it," she murmured to her reflection, repeating the words she had heard so many times from Mrs. Thompson. She dressed carefully, putting on the only shirt that wasn't frayed at the sleeves. From the bottom of a drawer, she took out a small, worn-out notebook, the same one she had bought years ago with the $25 from the unknown teacher. The first pages were filled with shaky, poorly formed letters. The last ones, with complex equations and detailed notes on history and literature. "It's today," she said to herself, holding the notebook to her chest. The journey to the university was a passage through two worlds. Leaving the peripheral neighborhood where she lived with Mrs. Thompson, Lucy saw the streets transform, the buildings grow taller, the cars newer. Arriving at the gates of the prestigious Federal University, she felt small, insignificant. "Hey, watch out!" An irritated voice brought her back to reality. Lucy had bumped into a girl getting out of a luxurious car. "Sorry," she murmured, feeling her face burn with shame. The girl looked her up and down, a mix of pity and disdain in her eyes, before walking away with her friends, all dressed in brand-name clothes and carrying expensive materials. For a moment, Lucy felt the old urge to flee, to return to the streets where, at least, she knew the rules. But then, she touched the notebook in her worn-out bag and took a deep breath. She hadn't come this far to give up now. The following hours were a blur of questions, numbers, texts, and more questions. Lucy felt her brain pulsing, years of intense study being put to the test. Every time she hesitated on a question, she closed her eyes and remembered the teacher who gave her a chance, Mrs. Thompson, and her words of encouragement, the sleepless nights studying by candlelight. When she finally left the exam room, Lucy felt exhausted but strangely light. She had done her best. The rest was in the hands of fate. The following weeks were a torture of waiting and doubt. Lucy alternated between moments of confidence and anxiety attacks. Mrs. Thompson was her safe harbor, always with a kind word and a cup of tea on sleepless nights. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, everything changed. Lucy was helping Mrs. Thompson hang clothes on the line when she heard shouts coming from the street. It was Peter, the neighbor's son, running towards her with a newspaper in his hand. "Lucy, Lucy, you're in the newspaper." With trembling hands, Lucy took the newspaper. On the front page, a headline jumped out. "Former homeless girl passes first in law school entrance exam." The world seemed to spin around her. Tears blurred her vision as she read the article, which told her story of overcoming how a girl who lived on the streets had become the top scorer in one of the most competitive entrance exams in the country. "My dear," Mrs. Thompson hugged her, crying with joy. "I always knew you could do it." In the days that followed, Lucy's life turned upside down. Reporters knocked on her door, wanting to hear her story. Scholarship offers and even job proposals began to arrive. But amid the whirlwind, Lucy did not forget her roots. One night, sitting on the small porch with Mrs. Thompson, she made a promise. "One day," she said, looking at the stars, "I will use what I learned to help other children like me. And I will find that teacher. I will show him that those $25 changed not only my life, but the lives of many others." Mrs. Thompson smiled, squeezing Lucy's hand. "I am sure you will, my dear. I am sure you will." And so, under the starry sky, Lucy took the first steps on a new journey. A journey that would take her farther than she had ever imagined, but that, without her knowing, would also bring her back to the starting point. The years passed in a whirlwind for Lucy. The girl who once slept on sidewalks now walked the marble corridors of one of the largest law firms in the country. At 30, Lucy Mendez was a name that caused a buzz in legal and business circles. That Monday morning, Lucy adjusted her impeccable Armani suit before entering the conference room. Around the mahogany table sat senior partners of the firm and representatives of a large multinational. "Gentlemen," Lucy began, her voice firm and confident, "the case we have at hand is not just about corporate disputes, it is about social justice and corporate responsibility. As she presented her innovative strategy, Lucy couldn't help but think about the path that had brought her there. Flashback to 12 years ago. Lucy, a freshman in law school, sitting in the back of the auditorium trying to decipher the legal jargon that her classmates from elite private schools seemed to master with ease. "Don't give up," she whispered to herself every night, studying by the light of a cheap lamp in her tiny dorm room. And she didn't give up. Sleepless nights, unpaid internships, the constant feeling of being an outsider in a world that wasn't made for her. But Lucy persevered. Back in the present, the meeting ended with handshakes and satisfied smiles. Lucy had convinced the client to adopt an approach that would not only resolve the litigation, but also implement social responsibility programs in the affected communities. "Brilliant as always," Dr. Mendez praised the senior partner. "No wonder you're being considered for the youngest partner in the firm's history." Lucy smiled politely, but her heart was elsewhere. Leaving the room, she picked up her cell phone and dialed a familiar number. "Mrs. Thompson." "Yes, it's me. How are you?" "No, don't worry about the hospital bills. Everything is taken care of. You took care of me. Now it's my turn to take care of you." Ending the call, Lucy felt a pang of guilt. It had been months since she had visited her mentor, now fighting an aggressive cancer. Life at the top had its price. At the end of the day, driving her latest model Audi through the congested streets of São Paulo, Lucy made a detour. She parked in front of a public school in the suburbs, watching the children leave, many with worn-out uniforms and patched backpacks. It was there at that moment that an idea began to form in her mind. An idea that had been latent for years, waiting for the right moment to bloom. The next day, Lucy surprised everyone by requesting a meeting with all the partners. "I want to propose a new department," she announced, her voice trembling slightly with contained emotion. A department dedicated exclusively to pro bono cases, focusing on education and children's rights. The silence that followed was deafening. Then the objections began. "That's not profitable. It will divert resources from important cases. It's not the focus of our firm." Lucy took a deep breath, remembering all the times she had to fight against the odds. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice now firm, "I was destined to be just another statistic, another homeless child lost in the system, but someone gave me a chance. $25 and a little faith changed my life. Imagine what we can do with the resources of this firm." The next hours were of intense debate. Lucy argued, negotiated, and finally convinced. The department was approved, with her at the helm. In the months that followed, Lucy worked tirelessly, days in court defending the right to education for underprivileged children, nights visiting communities, listening to stories, planning actions. Her work began to gain recognition, awards, invitations to speak, articles in prestigious magazines. "The lawyer who didn't forget her roots," the headlines said. But for Lucy, the true reward came in the smiles of the children who now had a chance, in the hugs of mothers who saw a better future for their children. One afternoon, after winning a particularly difficult case that ensured the reopening of a school in a poor community, Lucy returned to her office and found a letter on her desk. With trembling hands, she opened the envelope. It was from Mrs. Thompson. "My dear Lucy," the letter began, "I am so proud of the woman you have become. You have not only risen in life, but you are also pulling others with you. Always remember, your greatest wealth is not in your bank account, but in the impact you have on the world." Silent tears ran down Lucy's face as she reread the letter. Looking out the window of her office in the high-rise building, at the city that once sheltered her on its streets, Lucy made a silent promise. This was just the beginning. She would use every penny, every connection, every ounce of her influence to create a world where no child would have to sleep on the street, a world where everyone had the chance she had. And somewhere in the back of her mind, the image of a tired teacher handing $25 to a hungry girl remained alive. One day, Lucy thought, one day she would find him and show him what that simple act of kindness had unleashed. Lucy's office, on the 40th floor of one of São Paulo's most imposing skyscrapers, offered a panoramic view of the city. That night, as the city's lights twinkled below, Lucy found herself lost in thought, an untouched glass of red wine in her hand. At 37, Lucy Mendez was a name that opened doors. The youngest partner in the firm's history, a recognized philanthropist, her story of overcoming was a source of inspiration for many. But that night, something was bothering her. Her eyes landed on a pile of newspapers on her desk. The previous day's headline still stood out: Education crisis, more public schools, closed due to lack of resources. With a sigh, Lucy put the glass on the table and took a small object from a drawer. An old, worn-out notebook, its pages yellowed with time. As she opened it, a wave of emotions washed over her. The first pages, filled with shaky, poorly formed letters, were a testament to where she had started. Flipping through it, Lucy relived her journey, from the streets to the classroom, from the university to the courts. But it was on the last page that her eyes lingered. There, written in the hesitant handwriting of a 12-year-old girl, was a promise. One day I will find the teacher who gave me the $25 and show him it was worth it. Lucy closed her eyes, letting the memory of that distant day envelop her. The smell of hot asphalt, the buzz of the busy street, and then him. The tired man with kind eyes, who stopped and did what no one else had, saw her as a human being, not just another homeless child. 25 years, Lucy murmured to herself. 25 years since that day. An idea began to form in her mind. And as always happened when Lucy had an idea, action soon followed. Picking up the phone, she dialed a familiar number. "Rick, it's Lucy. I need a favor." Rick was an old college friend who now worked as a private investigator. "Remember that story I told you about the teacher who changed my life? I need you to find him." In the days that followed, Lucy found herself torn between the anxiety of waiting and the intensity of her work. While she fought in court to keep schools open and implement social programs, part of her mind was always on that search. A week later, her phone rang. "Lucy, it's Rick. I have news about your search." Lucy's heart raced. And, well, it wasn't easy. There are plenty of teachers named Andrew in Sao Paulo, but I think I found yours. Andrew Smith, 65 years old. He was a public school teacher until about 20 years ago. Was. The word fell like a weight in Lucy's stomach. Yes, he was laid off during budget cuts. After that, well, things got complicated for him. Rick continued talking, but Lucy barely heard. Her mind was processing the implications. The man who had given her hope when she needed it most had faced his own struggles. "Where is he now?" Lucy finally managed to ask. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Lucy, he's in the hospital. Sao Paulo Municipal Hospital. It seems he's very sick." The world seemed to spin around Lucy. She leaned against the table, feeling the weight of 25 years of unexpressed gratitude. "Thank you, Rick," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "Did you send me the address?" "It's in your email." "Lucy, good luck." Ending the call, Lucy stood still for a few moments, letting the reality of the situation sink in. Then, with renewed determination, she grabbed her bag and car keys. In the elevator on the way to the parking lot, Lucy made a silent promise. No matter what happened, she would do everything in her power to help the man who, unknowingly, had changed the course of her life. Driving through Sao Paulo's busy streets, Lucy felt a mix of emotions: gratitude, anxiety, and a bit of fear. What would she say to him? How would she explain the impact those $25 had on her life? As she approached the hospital, a certainty formed in her heart. This wasn't just about repaying a debt from the past. It was about closing a cycle and perhaps opening a new chapter. With a deep breath, Lucy parked the car. It was time to face the past and, who knows, redefine the future. The Sao Paulo Municipal Hospital was a maze of white corridors and the smell of antiseptic. Lucy, usually so confident in her elegant executive attire, felt strangely out of place as she walked towards the reception. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice betraying a slight tremor. "I'm looking for Andrew Smith. He was recently admitted." The receptionist typed the name into the computer, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Yes, he's in the East Wing, room 305. But are you family?" Lucy hesitated. He's an old friend, very important to me." Something in the intensity of Lucy's gaze must have convinced the receptionist, who nodded and handed her a visitor's badge. The walk to room 305 seemed endless. Each step echoed in the silent corridors, marking the approach of a moment Lucy had imagined for 25 years. Standing in front of the closed door, Lucy took a deep breath, gathering courage. But before she could knock, the door opened and a nurse came out hurriedly. "Excuse me," Lucy intercepted her. How is he?" The nurse looked at her with a mix of surprise and compassion. "Are you a friend of Mr. Smith? He's stable, but very weak. The cancer is in an advanced stage." The word cancer hit Lucy like a punch in the stomach. She thanked the nurse mechanically and, with a heavy heart, entered the room. The first thing she noticed was the silence, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of the monitors. In the bed lay a frail, pale man, so different from the image Lucy held in her memories. "Mr. Smith," she called softly, approaching the bed. "Andrew?" The man's eyes opened slowly, focusing on Lucy with a mix of confusion and curiosity. "Hello," he said, his voice hoarse and weak. "Do we know each other?" Lucy felt tears forming in her eyes. "Yes, Mr. Smith, we met a long time ago. I'm the girl you gave $25 to 25 years ago." Andrew blinked, clearly trying to process the information. 25? I don't remember. Lucy sat in the chair next to the bed, gently taking Andrew's hand. "It's okay. It was a long time ago. But that gesture, those 25 have changed my life." In the following minutes, Lucy told her story. She spoke about how she used the money to buy a notebook, how it inspired her to study, how she managed to get off the streets and eventually become a lawyer. Andrew listened attentively, his eyes gradually lighting up with understanding and emotion. I remember now," he finally said, his voice choked with emotion. "A small girl, with big, scared eyes. I was having a terrible day and something told me to stop and help." Lucy smiled through her tears. "You didn't just help me, you saved me." Andrew tried to sit up, but a wave of pain made him fall back. Lucy immediately stood up to assist him. "How much time?" she asked softly. Andrew understood the unspoken question. "The doctors say I have a few months. Maybe less." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with unspoken emotions and lost possibilities. "Tell me," Andrew finally spoke. "What happened after you became a lawyer?" Lucy began to talk, recounting her work, her struggles, her victories. She spoke about the pro bono department she had created, about the children she had helped. As she spoke, she noticed something changing in Andrew's face. The pain and fatigue were still there, but there was also a glow of pride and satisfaction. "You did all this," he said, squeezing Lucy's hand. "And to think I didn't even remember." "It doesn't matter if you remembered," Lucy replied. "What matters is that you acted. You made a difference when no one else would." They talked for hours. Andrew shared stories of his teaching career, of how he was laid off, of the tough years that followed. Lucy listened, her heart heavy with the injustice of it all. When the nurse came to announce that visiting hours were over, Lucy reluctantly stood up. "I'll be back tomorrow," she promised. "And the day after, and we'll figure this out together, okay?" Andrew nodded, a small smile on his lips. "Thank you, Lucy, for remembering, for coming back." Leaving the hospital, Lucy felt transformed. The search that had started as a mission of gratitude had become something deeper, more urgent. In the parking lot before getting into her car, Lucy made a call. "Dr. Mendez, this is Lucy Mendez. I need an urgent consultation for a patient with advanced cancer. The best treatment possible. Cost is not an issue." Ending the call, Lucy looked back at the hospital. A fierce determination shone in her eyes. "You gave me a chance at life," she murmured. "Now it's my turn to repay." And with that, she got into the car, her mind already formulating plans. The search had ended, but a new journey was just beginning. The days following the discovery of Andrew were a whirlwind for Lucy. Between daily visits to the hospital and endless meetings at the office, she barely had time to breathe. But a renewed energy drove her, fueled by the determination to make a difference in the life of the man who, unknowingly, had changed the course of her existence. One sunny morning, Lucy was in her office, the phone pressed to her ear as she spoke with one of the country's top oncologists. "Dr. Silva, I understand the case is complicated, but we need to try. Cost is not an issue. Yes, I take personal responsibility." Ending the call, Lucy leaned back in her chair, exhausted but satisfied. Dr. Silva had agreed to evaluate Andrew and propose an experimental treatment. It was a small chance, but it was a chance. Her cell phone vibrated with a message from Rick, the investigator. "Found more info about Andrew's old school. You won't believe what I discovered." Intrigued, Lucy asked Rick to come to her office immediately. An hour later, he walked in, carrying a thick folder. "Lucy, the school where Andrew taught, it still exists." "What? But he told me it closed years ago." Rick shook his head. "Not exactly. The school almost closed, yes. But a group of former students banded together and managed to keep it running as a community institution. It's a daily struggle, but they persist." Lucy took the folder, flipping through the documents with growing interest. Photos showed a worn-out building but full of life. Children smiling, volunteers painting walls, a small garden in the courtyard. "This is incredible," Lucy murmured, moved. "There's more," Rick continued. "Guess who is one of the main organizers of this project?" Lucy looked at him, expectant. "Maria Silva. Remember her? Andrew mentioned her. She was one of his brightest students." Lucy's mind worked quickly, connecting the dots. "Rick, you're a genius. This changes everything." In the days that followed, Lucy divided her time between the hospital and secret preparations. She made calls, organized meetings, mobilized her pro bono legal team. A week later, she walked into Andrew's hospital room, a mysterious smile on her face. "Andrew, I have a surprise for you," she announced, sitting down next to his bed. The teacher looked at her with curiosity. His condition had slightly improved since starting the new treatment, and there was a renewed sparkle in his eyes. "Do you remember when you told me about the school where you taught? About how you were forced to retire and how the school closed?" Andrew nodded, a shadow of sadness crossing his face. "Well," Lucy continued, barely containing her excitement, "the school didn't close. In fact, it's more alive than ever." Andrew's eyes widened in surprise. "What do you mean?" Lucy then told him everything she had discovered, about how a group of former students, led by Maria, had come together to save the school. How they turned the place into a community center for education and culture. "And the most amazing thing, Andrew," Lucy concluded, holding his hand, "is that they did all this inspired by you, by the impact you had on their lives." Andrew was silent for a long moment, silent tears streaming down his face. I didn't know," he finally said, his voice choked with emotion. "And there's more," Lucy continued. "I contacted Maria. I told her about you, about your situation. Andrew, they want you to come back, as an advisor, as a mentor, to see what you helped build." Andrew's expression was a mix of shock, joy, and apprehension. "But Lucy, I'm sick. I don't know if I can." Lucy gently squeezed his hand. "That's why I'm here. We'll do this together, okay? Step by step. First, we'll focus on your recovery, and when you're ready, we'll visit the school." For the first time since she had found him, Lucy saw a true smile light up Andrew's face. It was a smile of hope, of renewed purpose. "Thank you, Lucy," he said softly, "for not giving up, for giving me a reason to fight." Lucy smiled back, feeling a wave of emotion wash over her. "No, Andrew, thank you for showing me 25 years ago and again today the true power of kindness." As the sun set outside the hospital window, Lucy and Andrew began to plan. A return, a reconciliation with the past, and perhaps the beginning of a new chapter for both. The sun had barely risen when Lucy woke up, her heart pounding with a mix of anxiety and expectation. Today was the day. The day she would take Andrew back to the school where he had dedicated so many years of his life. As she got ready, Lucy couldn't help but think about how her life had changed in the past few weeks. From a successful lawyer focused on her career, she now found herself deeply involved in the life of a man she barely knew, but who had changed the course of her existence with a simple act of kindness 25 years ago. Arriving at the hospital, Lucy found Andrew already awake and anxious. Despite the pallor on his face and the evident fragility in his movements, there was a sparkle in his eyes that she hadn't seen since she had found him. "Ready for the big day?" Lucy asked, helping him get up. Andrew nodded, a nervous smile on his lips. "More than you can imagine." The ride to the school was silent, each lost in their own thoughts. Andrew looked out the window, his eyes taking in every detail of the neighborhood he hadn't seen in years. Lucy, on the other hand, cast worried glances at the teacher, fearing the day's emotions might be too much for his fragile health. Finally, they turned the corner and the school came into view. The old red brick building, now covered with a colorful mural, stood before them. The courtyard, once empty and neglected according to Andrew's memories, now buzzed with activity. Children played, volunteers moved back and forth, and a small local craft fair occupied a corner of the grounds. Lucy parked the car and turned to Andrew. "Are ready?" Andrew took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on the school. "I don't think I'll ever be completely ready, but let's go." As they got out of the car, a middle-aged woman came running towards them, a huge smile on her face. "Mr. Smith," she exclaimed, wrapping him in a tight hug. "I can't believe you're really here." Andrew blinked, confused for a moment, before recognition lit up his face. "Maria, my goodness, how you've grown." Maria stepped back, tears in her eyes. "Thai teacher, you have no idea how much it means to all of us to have you back here." Lucy watched the scene with a lump in her throat, moved by the impact Andrew had had on his students' lives. Maria then turned to Lucy, extending her hand. "And you must be Dr. Mendez. I have no words to thank you for everything you've done to make this possible." Lucy shook Maria's hand, feeling an immediate connection with this woman who, like her, had been deeply impacted by Andrew's kindness. "Please, call me Lucy. And there's no need for thanks. I'm just repaying a debt of gratitude." Maria guided them through the courtyard, explaining the changes and improvements they had made over the years. Andrew walked slowly, absorbing every detail, occasionally stopping to greet former students who were now volunteer teachers or parents of current students. "Look, teacher," Maria pointed to a small garden in the corner of the courtyard. "Remember how you always said we wanted to teach more than just subjects? Now we have gardening and sustainability classes." Andrew smiled, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "It's more than I ever dreamed of." As they entered the main building, they were greeted by an explosion of applause. The hallway was packed with people, teachers, students, staff, all there to welcome Andrew. "Surprise!" Maria shouted, smiling broadly. Andrew stood still, overwhelmed by the emotion. Lucy gently placed a hand on his back, offering silent support. One by one, former students approached to hug Andrew, share memories, and thank him. Stories of how his classes had changed lives, how his support had made a difference at crucial moments. In the middle of the crowd, Lucy noticed a familiar face. It was Carlos, the student who had questioned the usefulness of quadratic equations so many years ago. He approached Andrew, now a grown man with his own children by his side. "Teacher," Carlos said, his voice choked with emotion, "I never had the chance to thank you. You didn't give up on me, even when I had given up on myself. Today I'm an engineer, and it all started in your math class." Andrew hugged Carlos, unable to hold back his tears. "You don't understand," he said, looking at the crowd. "It was you who saved me. Each one of you." Maria then led everyone to the auditorium, where an improvised ceremony was held. Andrew was honored with a plaque, recognizing him as the heart and soul of the community school. When it was time for Andrew to speak, he hesitated, clearly emotional. Lucy approached, offering support. I don't know what to say," Andrew began, his voice trembling. "When I was forced to retire, I thought my life was over, that everything I had done didn't matter. But looking at all of you today, I see that I was wrong. Each seed we plant, each life we touch, continues to grow long after we leave." He paused, looking directly at Lucy. "And sometimes, those seeds bloom in places we never imagined, bringing fruits we didn't even know we had planted." Andrew then briefly told Lucy's story, of how a small act of kindness had completely changed the course of a life. The audience listened in reverent silence, many with tears in their eyes. "What I learned today," Andrew continued, his voice gaining strength, "is that our actions have power beyond what we can see. Every act of kindness, every word of encouragement, every moment when we choose to be better than the circumstances demand, all of this echoes through time, touching lives we don't even know exist." The auditorium erupted in applause. Lucy, with tears in her eyes, hugged Andrew, feeling the weight of 25 years of unexpressed gratitude finally dissolve. After the ceremony, while Andrew chatted with old colleagues and students, Lucy found herself wandering the school halls. She stopped in front of a mural full of photos and newspaper clippings, documenting the institution's history. One photo in particular caught her attention. It was Andrew, much younger, surrounded by a group of smiling students. The text below the photo read, "Teacher Andrew Smith receives Educator of the Year Award, 1999. That was a special year. Maria's voice surprised her. "It was when we started the tutoring program for at-risk students. Mr. Smith insisted that everyone deserved a chance, no matter where they came from." Lucy felt a lump in her throat. "He changed so many lives." Maria nodded, a soft smile on her lips. "And continues to change. You know, when we found out about his condition, we decided to create a scholarship in his name. For students who can't, like you, just need a chance to shine." At that moment, Lucy knew what she needed to do. "Maria, I want to help, not just with the scholarship, but with everything. This school, this legacy. It's too important to be lost." The two women exchanged a look of mutual understanding. There, in that hallway full of memories, a partnership was born that would change the future of the school and countless lives. As the day came to an end and they prepared to leave, Lucy watched Andrew say goodbye to his former students and colleagues. Despite the evident fatigue on his face, there was a peace and satisfaction she had never seen before. In the car, on the way back to the hospital, Andrew took Lucy's hand. "Thank you," he said simply, "for bringing me back, for showing me that my life had meaning." Lucy gently squeezed his hand. "No, Andrew, thank you for teaching me 25 years ago and again today the true power of kindness." As they drove through the darkening city, Lucy felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was not an end, but a new beginning, a beginning full of possibilities, of lives to be touched, of differences to be made. And it had all started with $25 and a heart willing to help. The return to the hospital after the emotional day at the school was quiet. Lucy, driving carefully through the nighttime streets of São Paulo, kept casting worried glances at Andrew, who rested in the passenger seat. The teacher's face was pale, marked by exhaustion, but his eyes shone with a light she hadn't seen since she had found him. "It was an incredible day," murmured Andrew, his voice weak but full of emotion. "I never imagined I could have touched so many lives." Lucy smiled, but her mind was elsewhere. During the visit to the school, she had noticed something in Andrew that deeply worried her. Moments of confusion, memory lapses that went beyond normal fatigue. And now, watching him from the corner of her eye, she could no longer deny it. Something was wrong. Arriving at the hospital, Lucy helped Andrew settle into his room. "I'll talk to the doctor," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. "Rest a bit." In the hallway, Lucy found Dr. Silva, the oncologist responsible for Andrew's case. "Dr. Mendes," he greeted her, his face serious. "I was just about to call you. We have the results of the latest tests." Lucy's heart sped up. "And?" The doctor hesitated for a moment. "The experimental treatment, it's not working as we hoped. In fact, the cancer has spread. And there are neurological complications affecting his memory and cognition." Lucy felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. "How much time?" she managed to ask. "Weeks, maybe a month, at most." The words hit Lucy like a punch in the stomach. All the progress, all the hope of the past few days, it all seemed to vanish in an instant. "Does he know?" Lucy asked, her voice trembling. Dr. Silva shook his head. "Not yet. I thought you'd want to be present when we told him." Lucy nodded mechanically, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. How could she tell Andrew? How could she take away the hope he had just regained? Returning to the room, Lucy found Andrew sitting on the bed, flipping through a photo album Maria had given him at the school. "Lucy," he smiled when he saw her. "Come look at this. These are photos from my early years of teaching. Look how young we were." Lucy approached, sitting on the edge of the bed. Her heart broke seeing the happiness on Andrew's face, knowing what she was about to say. "Andrew," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "The doctor wants to talk to us." Andrew's smile faltered for a moment, but quickly returned. "Sure, it must be about the next phase of treatment, right?" "I'm feeling so good after today." Lucy couldn't respond, just held Andrew's hand as Dr. Silver entered the room. The next few minutes were a blur of medical terms, gentle explanations, and heavy silences. Andrew listened to everything with surprising calm, occasionally squeezing Lucy's hand. When the doctor finished, Andrew remained silent for a long moment. Then, to Lucy's surprise, he smiled. "You know," he said, his voice surprisingly firm, "when you appeared after so many years, Lucy, I thought it was a miracle, a chance to correct past mistakes, to make a difference again. But now I understand. The miracle wasn't for me, it was for you." Lucy looked at him, confused. "Oh, what do you mean?" Andrew adjusted himself in the bed, his eyes shining with a clarity Lucy hadn't seen in weeks. "Your whole life, you've carried the weight of that debt. Those $25, you built an incredible career, helped so many people, all motivated by that single act of kindness. But Lucy, you've already repaid that debt 1,000 times over." Tears began to stream down Lucy's face. Andrew continued, "What happened today at the school, seeing all those lives that were touched, all the seeds we planted over the years, that's the real miracle. It's not about me living a few more months or years. It's about understanding that what we do echoes through time, touching lives we don't even know exist." Lucy sobbed, unable to contain her emotion. "But Andrew, there's still so much I want to do for you. So much I want to repay." Andrew smiled gently. "You've already done it, my dear. You've given me the greatest gift of all, the certainty that my life had meaning. That the tired teacher who gave 25 to a hungry girl wasn't just helping a child, but planting a seed that would bloom into an entire forest of kindness and compassion." At that moment, something changed inside Lucy. The weight of the gratitude she had carried for 25 years began to lift, replaced by a deeper understanding of the cycle of kindness she and Andrew had started. "What do we do now?" Lucy asked, her voice hoarse with emotion. Andrew picked up the photo album again. "Now, my dear, you tell me more about all the lives you've touched, and I tell you more about the students who passed through my life, and together we celebrate the power of a simple act of kindness." The following hours passed in a mix of laughter and tears. Andrew shared stories of his teaching years, of troubled students who became exemplary citizens, of small gestures that had enormous impacts. Lucy, in turn, talked about the cases she had taken pro bono, the children she had helped get off the streets, the families she had kept together. As the night wore on, Andrew began to show signs of fatigue. His eyes, though still bright with emotion, started to close. "Lucy," he said, his voice now a whisper, "promise me something. Anything, Andrew. Continue the work, not just at the school, but everywhere. Keep planting seeds of kindness, even if you never see the fruits. And always remember, every act of kindness, no matter how small, has the power to change the world." Lucy held Andrew's hand, feeling the weight of that promise. "I promise, Andrew, with all my heart." As Andrew fell asleep, Lucy stayed by his side, reflecting on the winding paths life had taken to bring them to this moment. From a hungry girl on the street to a successful lawyer. From a disheartened teacher to a man at peace with his legacy. Looking out the hospital window at the city that never slept, Lucy made a silent promise. She would not only continue Andrew's work, but expand it. She would use every resource at her disposal, every connection she had made, to create a world where acts of kindness were not the exception, but the rule. And although the future was uncertain and her time with Andrew short, there was a peace in that hospital room. A peace that came from understanding that sometimes the greatest act of gratitude is not repayment, but passing it forward, continuing the cycle of kindness that began with $25 on a busy street 25 years ago. The weeks that followed passed like a blur for Lucy. She divided her time between the hospital, where Andrew bravely fought the disease consuming his body, and the school, where the teacher's legacy was gaining new life. Despite his growing physical weakness, Andrew seemed to gain spiritual strength each day. His hospital room became a gathering point for former students, colleagues, and even strangers who had heard his story. Each visit brought new stories of transformed lives, of dreams realized, all tracing their roots back to Andrew's teachings and kindness. Lucy watched it all with a mix of admiration and sadness. She saw the lasting impact a life dedicated to good could have, and at the same time felt the weight of the imminent loss. One afternoon, while helping Andrew sit up in bed, he held her hand with surprising strength. "Lucy," he said, his eyes shining with an intensity that contrasted with his frail body, "I need you to do something for me." "Anything, Andrew," Lucy replied, sitting down next to him. "I want you to tell our story, not just yours and mine, but all of ours. How a small act of kindness can trigger a chain reaction that spans generations." Lucy felt a lump in her throat. "Andrew, I'm not a writer," he smiled gently. "You're a storyteller, Lucy. Every time you defend someone in court, every time you inspire a child to dream, you're telling a story. This is just another story to tell." That night, after leaving Andrew to rest, Lucy sat in her home office. Before her was a blank notebook, not much different from the one she had bought so many years ago with Andrew's $25. With a deep sigh, she began to write. The words flowed like a river finally released. Lucy wrote about the hungry girl on the street, about the tired but kind teacher. She wrote about years of struggle and perseverance, about triumphs and defeats. She wrote about the school that refused to die, about students who became teachers, about a cycle of kindness that perpetuated itself. Days turned into weeks, and the manuscript grew. Lucy wrote in the intervals between hospital visits and court hearings. She wrote late at night and in the early hours of the morning. It was as if the words had a life of their own, eager to be told. Meanwhile, Andrew's condition worsened. The doctors spoke in terms of days, no longer weeks, but the sparkle in the teacher's eyes did not fade. He listened attentively as Lucy read excerpts from the manuscript, occasionally suggesting a change here, an additional detail there. It was on a Sunday morning, with the rising sun painting the São Paulo sky in shades of pink and gold, that Andrew called Lucy close. "It's time," he said simply. Lucy held his hand, silent tears running down her face. "Andrew, Shh," he interrupted her gently. "No need for words now. You've said everything you needed to say through your actions. Always remember, Lucy, the true measure of a life is not in the years we live, but in the lives we touch." With one last serene smile, Andrew closed his eyes. His breathing became slower, deeper, until, with a final sigh, he passed away. Lucy stayed by his side for a long time, holding his hand, feeling a mix of pain and gratitude so deep it threatened to consume her. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activities. Andrew's funeral was an event that surprised everyone by its magnitude. The small cemetery could barely contain the crowd of lives touched by him, former students, colleagues, entire families who had been impacted by his kindness over the years. Lucy watched it all with a mix of sadness and admiration. Every story shared, every tear shed was a testament to the enduring power of an act of kindness. Weeks later, Lucy was back at the school. The place had transformed. With the support of her newly created foundation, new programs were being implemented, scholarships distributed, the infrastructure improved. Standing in the courtyard, Lucy watched a group of children playing. Her eyes fixed on one girl in particular. Tousled hair, clothes a bit too big, eyes bright with intelligence and determination. "Hey," Lucy called gently, approaching. "What's your name?" The girl looked at her with a mix of distrust and curiosity. "Anna," she replied after a moment. Lucy smiled, remembering herself so many years ago. "Anna, do you like studying?" The girl nodded shyly. "But it's hard sometimes. We don't have much money for books and stuff." Lucy felt her heart tighten. Slowly, she took something from her bag, a bound copy of the manuscript she had written. "Anna, I want you to have this," Lucy said, handing the book to the girl. "It's a story about how small acts of kindness can change the world. Promise me you'll read it, okay?" Anna took the book carefully, her eyes widening at its weight and size. "I promise," she said solemnly. Watching Anna run back to her friends, the book clutched to her chest. Lucy felt a wave of emotion wash over her. It was as if she could see the invisible threads of destiny intertwining, creating new patterns, new possibilities. At that moment, Lucy truly understood what Andrew had taught her. Life wasn't about grand heroic gestures or monumental achievements. It was about small acts of kindness, repeated day after day, creating ripples that spread far beyond our immediate reach. With a smile on her lips and determination in her heart, Lucy walked back to the school building. There was much work to be done, many lives to be touched, many stories yet to be written, and it had all started with $25 and a heart willing to help.